He said, be brave, my son, I'll be home soon. The boy held on to hope till he got that awful news. And as they folded up the stars and stripes, 21 guns pointed towards the sky. As the shots rang out, he flinched a little each time. Then a soldier in his best dress walked up to him, and you know the rest.
This show is brought to you by Operation Encore. Operation Encore is a 501c nonprofit that is helping change the lives of our veteran community. Let me tell you a little bit about what they do. They are helping veterans get into the music industry. They're helping them learn the business, get songs recorded, and not only that, making dreams happen. You know, most of these veterans have got the idea of becoming a musician way before they went into the military. And Operation Encore is filling that gap from while they served in the military and helping them change their lives and live out those dreams. Operation Encore is a nonprofit. You can go to this link right there and click on it. Give them a little help. Hit that donate button. Follow them. Learn about all the great things that Operation Encore does for our veterans. Hey, welcome everybody to Spirits and Stories. This is your host, Donald Dunn. Hey, today we're back on my favorite topic, mental health. It is important to me, should be important to you. And our next guest has got some amazing stuff to talk about. So let me introduce to you Susanna Rose. After serving in 2 combat tours in Afghanistan as a Marine Corps officer, Susanna experienced a spiritual awakening that changed her life forever. Since then, she's dedicated her life as an energy priestess and embodied consciousness guide. She serves dozens of people in one-to-one group ceremonies, guiding them in their own spiritual awakening process. Let's introduce Suzanne.
So nice to be with you, Donald. Thank you so much for that introduction.
Hey, it was wrote by a very smart person, yourself.
I got a little help. I usually have other people write some of my bios because I'm like, I don't think I can do this. I imagine other people have that challenge too.
It is a challenge to write about yourself. It really is. I just published my first book, and it was about my experiences in the military. Man, it took me forever because I was like, this guy's an asshole.
That's exactly how we most of us feel about ourselves. We're like, why am I writing about this? And I'm so glad you did, because I am certain that your story will speak to so many people. So thank you for diving in there and going into that discomfort to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what brought you to the Marine Corps?
Wonderful question. It's funny because when I look back, I realized it was like between the Peace Corps and the Marine Corps, which
opposite ends.
Opposite ends of the spectrum. This is sort of the story of my life. You'll get a theme for it, right? There's a lot of polarity in my existence. I tend to put myself in these places that are places where I either like radically don't fit, or they're just like the opposite polarity from where parts of me are. And I have these 2 sides of me that kind of struggle. But my father was in the Marine Corps during Vietnam. He was a lawyer. Had I known before joining the military that being a lawyer in the Marine Corps was a wildly different experience from being your average Marine officer, I might have taken his advice with a grain of salt, but he was so compelled about the training he received and everything that he did. And a lot of the men in my family were all in the military, not necessarily for careers, but at least for periods of time. And so there was an expectation and an understanding in my family that you serve in some way, whether it's through church service or, Peace Corps, something, you do something to serve something bigger. Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's, it's kind of like a mixed feeling. You say to yourself, man, we send kids off to war that aren't even old enough to drink yet. And on that same token, we also send kids that aren't grown yet to a place that's going to help them grow up in a safer environment than on the streets. And
Yes.
so it is kind of a mixed feeling, and it is good to serve. I do think everybody should do something to give back to this country, whether it be your community, like you said, or the whole country as a whole. So you're absolutely right.
Mm.
So how long were you in?
I was well, first I went to the Naval Academy. So I kind of started that military lifestyle when I was 18. And those quote unquote real Marines out there who didn't go to the academy will make fun of me for that. I hear you. I totally get it.
Yep.
And boat school, and then I joined the Marine Corps, and I did 5 years with 2 tours in that time. And it was pretty quick that I realized, I was like, oh, maybe I should have joined the Peace Corps. Maybe I'm going to be the naysayer here in some of these circumstances. But I'm also deeply grateful. It was exactly what I was supposed to do and where I was
Yeah.
supposed to be.
Yeah, and I have just recently discovered that myself, that your life can be out of balance and you not even know it. You think you're on that path that you're supposed to be. I want to own my own business, and I'm going to do great things. And the whole time you're living your dreams, you still feel like, man, I'm not whole yet. And
Oh,
when you put yourself on the path that you were meant to be on, that changes. It's gone. You now feel at peace, and you're like, wow, that's what I was supposed to do. So yeah, and just like you said, that's what you were supposed to do at that time.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's amazing.
yeah.
And like I said, I just recently found that I'm a typical guy. I'm a slow learner.
I don't believe it. Not for a second. Yeah, these are I mean, this is part of probably what we'll talk about today is purpose, right? Is really stepping into your purpose. And every one of these decisions does lead to really stepping into who you are inside. And every one of these opportunities is a chance to also like peel away layers and also learn like what you don't want to do. Like
Yeah,
start to understand what your no is and be like, oh yeah, actually that isn't for me for a lifetime. But now that I know what I don't want to do, I can start to narrow it down to what I do and what I
yeah,
really, really resonate with. Mhm.
yeah. So you did 5 years as an
Mhm.
officer, and
Mhm.
then you got out. What did you do when you got out, besides root for Navy in the Army Navy football game?
Beat Army, go Navy. Yes, that did happen. That has happened. I do have a little bit of post trauma from Navy football games because they forced us to go to them and then stand in the cold for hours. And I was like, what am I doing here on a Saturday watching football? Like, why? But being in the Marine Corps, and I'll get to what I did when I got out and why. But going to war twice, and of course having this part of me that wanted to join the Peace Corps, and actually there was also a little part of me that thought, oh, if I joined the Marine Corps, I had this image that I would do like humanitarian aid, that I would like be helping people. That was kind of my vision, which I mean, it's so when I look back on it, I'm like, Susanna, you joined like the finest killing force in the world. What were you thinking? But at the same time, it taught me a level of discipline and fortitude and grit and all of that. But going to war and being physically there and seeing it and being in the energy of it radically shifted who I am. And first caused me to go through a process of disillusionment of like, how could there be a God? Like, how could there be anything bigger that allows this kind of horror to happen? And and then moving through the different stages of like, I don't believe in anything. I'm nihilistic. Like, I'm atheist. There can't be anything bigger.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely deconstructing a lot of the belief systems that I grew up with. I grew up Methodist, and my father's whole lineage were Methodist teachers and preachers and bishops, and I was like, all that's bullshit. All of that is crap. And then and then I decided to get out because I realized that if I stayed in this state, and I had some jobs in the Marine Corps that really did give me meaning. I was a victim advocate for survivors of sexual assault. And that gave me an immense amount of ability to serve and to
Yeah.
be a warm space for people to confide in. But it was clear to me early on that I was only going to do my contract and then leave.
Right.
And upon leaving, I definitely left with post-trauma, not diagnosed. A lot of us, leave without getting diagnosed with
Yep.
anything. And also because I didn't realize it, right? Didn't fully understand. And then I joined the corporate world in search of my purpose. And I had this amazing opportunity from the leadership at Facebook to join and become, like another worker in the tech industry. And I went through even deeper layers of meaninglessness and disillusionment. But all of that brought me ultimately to plant medicine, which was very powerful for me. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I am a big believer. I've had just too many people that have experienced it, that have talked about how good it's helped, to think that there's nothing there.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think there's a purpose and a way, like you called it. It's medicine.
Mhm.
So there's a difference between recreation and medicine. Um, and a lot of people think of psilocybin and mushrooms as, oh, that you're just getting high and everything else. And there is way more to that. I think that there is, it's kind of like the magic key, man, because the military, as you know, just kind of puts this layer over your brain and reweaves all these fibers together and make you think a certain way. And it's kind of like the key to allowing you to realize that's not the all and be all. There's other stuff out there.
Yeah, I'm like giving you snaps over here because I couldn't like what a beautiful description. I'm glad this is recorded because I want to like take that little nugget that's so wise. That and what's cool is like that's what plant medicine does, but kind of the
Mhm.
opposite way, right? So where the military and our society and our parents and our religious systems create this mesh network of beliefs that
Mhm.
kind of, some people will call it brainwashing. I'm like, you can believe whatever you want to believe. You'll go into the places where you'll allow yourself to be brainwashed by whoever.
Yeah. Yeah, you were right.
Yeah, right. Like you'll choose it. But then to unbrainwash yourself and to just untangle yourself from the idea that all of those beliefs are the end all be all. Like this is the only way or these are the only beliefs because they're not necessarily wrong. They
Right.
just are one way and one belief system. And what medicine like this and what a lot of I believe is like any kind of altered state of consciousness, breath work, meditation, there's
Mhm.
all these different ways of getting out of the ordinary mode, the default mode network of the brain.
Yeah.
And what it does is it reminds you that there is more. There's more.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it. If we said, look, we have now explored 50 miles of the Pacific Ocean and we've seen everything there is to see, there's nothing left to see. That's kind of the way the brain is. I mean, we know so little about the brain, and there's people out there that can do amazing things that all of us have the ability to do. Just some people can reach it. Um,
Mm.
Remote viewing is one of those types of things.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think partly too, when you're taking psilocybin, it allows you to open some of those doors, and you see things that you probably would have never thought of yourself. And I'm not saying they're real and they're like right in front of you and you're psychic and all that stuff. I'm just saying it's allowing you to explore parts of your brain that can reach things that we don't necessarily know a lot about.
That is precisely what it's doing. And there is, for those who are listening and may not know some of the neurobiology of it, neurologically, when you're sitting with psilocybin or LSD or really any plant medicine, it's usually quieting the default mode network of the brain. And for those who don't know what the default mode network is, I often give an analogy, which is you get in the car, you use one hand, probably your left hand, to open the door. You sit in the seat, you pull the seatbelt across, so you put your hands on the wheel. You do all of this movement with your body.
Mm-hmm.
That's muscle memory. You know
Yep.
how to do it. You've done it 100,000 times, right? So
Yep.
you don't even have to think about it. And that's because it's a pattern that's stored in these parts of your brain that is the default part of your brain that's just telling you how to take the same highway to school to work every day, right? And then when you engage with plant medicine or some other altered state of consciousness like meditation, breath work, sound healing, all sorts of different vibrational frequencies,
Mm-hmm.
you quiet that part of the brain. That's the pattern-based part of the brain, which keeps us safe. It's a safety mechanism, right?
Yeah.
And it also keeps things a little easier. So you don't have to remember and think about everything like it's new. Then you start to see everything almost like a child, right? From this
Yep.
perspective of newness. And it highlights these parts of the brain. It also quiets down the amygdala, which for a lot of us veterans, the amygdala is very active because we're in a state of hypervigilance. And the cortisol is, pumping through the brain. So it quiets all of that down, quiets the nervous system down, and then causes these creative centers of the brain and the prefrontal cortex to activate more, which gives you this access to parts of your mind and also connections, like neural pathways
Yeah.
form as a result of that experience. So then you have new neural pathways where synapses can talk to each other from parts of the brains that were never ever talking to each other before. And
Yeah.
that's wild.
It is. And so it also, psilocybin also will increase blood flow to your brain, right?
Yeah.
So imagine all the things that we do that will decrease the amount of blood flow we have, whether it be cigarettes, whatever types of
Alcohol. Oh, yeah.
alcohol, things in our food, right? Imagine if we didn't do any of that stuff, and then you had psilocybins, how much more would happen from just more blood flow? I mean, that's the root of what's happening. Your brain needs blood. The more blood, the better it
More
can.
life.
Yeah.
Blood is life, right? It's the circulation of, in the Eastern way, they think of it like chi, right? There's like energy that's flowing through your body all the time. And blood carries it. Blood carries oxygen, blood carries all these nutrients to different parts of your body. You know that when a muscle doesn't get blood, all of us who have been trained in the military in CPR training, right? Like if you put a tourniquet on, right, that part of the body is not going to get blood and it will die. And
Yep.
so the more blood flow, the more life you have into a place. And I think that's spot on. It really is. It comes down to that.
Yeah. The other thing I find fascinating, and I don't know what causes this, but there's a lot of people, and all the people. I'm only going to speak from veterans because that's the only people I've really talked to about this. But a lot of them come back from these journeys and say, since I came back, I haven't had another drink. And they
Yes.
may not have even went to that journey to stop drinking. They went for another reason, and just they no longer have the urge. They have a different priority in their life and a different look. And it's crazy how so many people have said that, to think that, okay, well, that's definitely not. you can't say that's not a side effect. That's definitely a side effect, you know?
There's dozens. I mean, you can literally look this up on Reddit, on Facebook threads, like anywhere there's a message board. Just type in, psilocybin, either microdosing or macrodosing,
Yep.
and alcohol or alcoholism. And there's also a whole bunch of scientific research on it as well these days. But I love the anecdotes from real people because those to me are the ones that really speak. This is just like some guy in, Utah. and he's like, I literally cured my alcoholism by working with psilocybin through macrodosing and microdosing. And I believe that it does have a lot to do with the recalibration of those neural pathways and the reset of that, which also, as we mentioned, it quiets the amygdala. Well, alcohol, a substance like alcohol and nicotine, which I'm not, by the way, like against either of those. I just believe in everything in moderation because I do enjoy a really good margarita every now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
And
shelves full of bourbon, so I can relate.
so good. I mean, yeah, this is spirits and stories, right?
Yep. Yep.
So ultimately, I believe that there is benefit to these, but what alcohol and nicotine do is they ground. They tend to be grounding medicines. And actually, tobacco is a plant medicine.
Yeah.
Just like for those out there, maybe not the vaping kind, but when you get really high quality tobacco, it's called grandfather tobacco for a reason. And alcohol will cause the body to feel more grounded and more in the body, which is why a lot of us start to feel more emotional when we're drinking, right? But ultimately, psilocybin causes the body to feel a natural sense of grounding, a natural sense of like, I'm here, I'm in my body, and I don't need another substance or an outside thing to get me that feeling.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do, I mean, I'm an energy worker, as you mentioned in my bio. So a lot of that has to do with like blocks that are happening in our root, like in our sense of security and our sense of safety. And a lot of us, those begin in childhood, they begin in traumatic environments that we grow up in. And then we no longer have that sense of safety. And basically the root to earth, right? To your, like, I'm planted here and I'm planted in this body. And psilocybin can help with that in a really big way. And ultimately, over time, I've found this for myself too, because I was a solid drinker. I had a lot of red wine, a lot of margaritas, a lot of gin and tonics.
Marine Corps, Semper Fi.
Semper Fi. And I was a solid drinker when I was in the military. And a lot of the reason for that was because I was not fully grounded to this planet, to this life, to this body, because I was hypervigilant and I was feeling afraid. And psilocybin will, and also LSD, some of the others as well, will absolutely help to heal that.
Yeah, and that's another thing too that everybody says, that's another thing that everybody that didn't do it that has observed the people that have done it say. They're more in the moment. I mean, those exact words are used over and over. And so yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah.
Now I think there's also some misnomers out there too, right?
Mhm.
So let's talk real quick about what is the benefits and what is right and wrong for should you microdose or should you macrodose? What is the real deciding factor on which way somebody should go?
Wonderful, like just whole thought process, because so many people, we just don't have enough information out there, right? And a lot of that has to do with the war on drugs and this societal belief that in my world, like medicine is medicine or drugs and drugs are medicine.
Yep.
Like, we've got it backwards, folks. Like the opiates are not medicine.
Right.
So but the answer to your question is, I'll start with just like, find a facilitator or find someone who has some information about this. It could be this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Listen to the podcast of people who have not just like consumed the medicine, but also have done dozens or hundreds of ceremonies where people are coming to them or coming to their retreats or their events. Find someone that you can safely listen to or at least connect with. And then if you want to do some of these things on your own while you're also researching in that way, I would recommend that you start with just setting, and dosage. Okay. And these are very simple concepts. The first is mindset. So if you are going to engage with any medicine, I speak a lot about psilocybin because that's the primary medicine that I work with and what our community works with in our organization. Mindset. Set an intention for your practice, whether it's a macrodose or a microdose. The setting is then really important. What is my intention? Okay, my intention is to feel a sense of joy and peace and balance. Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
intention. Well, maybe I don't take a gram of psilocybin at a Metallica concert if I want to experience joy, balance, and peace. It's not to say that you can't experience those emotions in a Metallica concert. They would be awesome.
Yeah.
However, you may go into a slightly different place, especially if you have hundreds or thousands of people around you. So you want to be really mindful of what setting you're in for the intention that you're setting. And then related to that is the dosage. And so if you are going to engage with it in a more recreational way, reduce your dosage. It should be a microdose. It should be very, very small amounts. And then if you want to increase that dosage, the medicine really likes to be worked with in nature in quieter environments. Maybe you can listen to some really nice music, but in general, it doesn't want to be around a whole bunch of people because then you're going to be empathetic to their experience and sometimes take on their energy. Depending upon your level of experience with boundaries. So those are the three things to start with. And while you're also doing research with a facilitator you trust or someone who has worked with these medicines, and if you're debating whether to microdose or macrodose, this is a good question. I mean, I can give some generalities on that, right? But it really is individual. Macro dosing, I would recommend your first time with someone who has either experience with the medicine, like a lot of experience in their own practice, or a facilitator, and go into a ceremonial space where you are being held and taken care of fully. Because if you're engaging with high amounts of it, you are going into a fully altered state, and the likelihood is you've never been to that state before. So
Right.
it's a little bit like climbing a mountain, climbing a big mountain with no guide. Like, don't do that. Don't
Yeah.
do that. Go
Absolutely.
find a guide. And then the second thing I'll say about microdosing is microdosing can be a little more accessible to more people. Um, but just know that it's going to be more of um, a longer term, consistent practice that will impact you kind of the way that vitamins impact you, right? You'll feel it, you'll feel the change, but it's going to be subtle. So it's not going to be like this big, huge revelation that's going to change your life in one day. It is going to be an integrative process that's step by step by step. And as long as you have the grace and the patience for that process, you will see huge results. And I'd also recommend a guide for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another part. So like you keep saying rituals and ceremonial, you know,
Yeah.
this process has a physical process to it as well. Not just
Mhm.
I took my 2 pills in the morning, off to work I go, like what the VA gives you. And
Yes.
so I think you've got to understand and get used to the medicine has to be done in a certain way and in a certain, like you said, place,
Yeah.
mindset. Probably after getting into an argument with somebody and being ready to punch somebody is probably not a good time. Um, and I think, you know, a lot of the people I've talked to, that's kind of how they take it too. They
Mhm.
they don't do it every week. You know, it's a few times a year, and it's a time that they set aside away from work, away from family problems, away from everything, and they go and get into themselves and
Mhm.
learn a little bit about themselves.
Yeah.
Um, I also find it really fascinating that the more that we know about it, the more that we start understanding that some of our things that we believe might have came from people taking psilocybin. You
I
go back into the Egyptian age and the pyramid age, and there was a lot of things that they said that a lot of people that take it now say. I mean,
Donald, you and I are like we're definitely soul family. I'm glad we found each other. I'm like, we're talking about Egypt. Yes.
yep,
The answer is yes. And even further back, I mean, for those of you who have seen Fantastic Fungi, you know, there's the stoned ape theory, which says that during a period of time, our early ancestors were following the bison, following the herds of animals across, you know, the savannas and the plains, and they would eat the mushrooms in the dung piles, and the
yep,
mushrooms that grow out of the dung piles are psilocybin mushrooms.
yep,
So they have psilocin in them and they have psilocybin. So you are going to have that psychoactive experience. And of course, this is an early human.
right,
So it's just opening their mind in these massive ways. And we had a period of time in our human history where there was a massive um, expansion of consciousness. And there's really no explanation for why. And
yeah,
it's where fire started to come in, where like even wheels started to come. There was just like
yeah,
incredible inventions. So I believe, like you, that these medicines have been with us for a very long time. I
yeah,
write about it in my thesis work, and that was one of my favorite parts of the thesis work was learning how far back we have tracked our use and our partnership with these medicines, especially mushrooms. And in Greek times, they would bring together all of the great thinkers. I mean, you know, we're talking Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all of the great philosophers from around the country, and they'd invite them to these Eleusinian mysteries, and they would happen once a year, I believe. And then they drink the Kikion drink, and that was essentially filled with a multitude of psychoactive substances, including LSA. And LSA is an early precedent or early sort of ancestor, I suppose, to LSD, which is
mhm,
now synthesized, right? But it was essentially a fungi that would grow on wheat. And they discovered that in very small doses, it would be psychoactive. Now, in very large doses, like growing on old bread, for example, you would die. So you had to you had to dose it real carefully. But we discovered that a lot of these ideas, I mean, I'm a believer that democracy came from this, right? Like that's where democracy came from, was some of these salons, these big summits that they would have and invite the philosophers, and then they'd all get super high.
yeah,
And they do it in a ceremonial fashion, in a ritualistic fashion. Of course, they'd all be, you know, together and in an intentional setting. But it was all to really connect and expand their consciousness. And what's cool is we're living in a time, I believe, that's like a renaissance, very similar to that.
yeah. I mean, I can speak from a time when I was playing semi-pro poker, right? So a lot of Texas Hold'em, and I could always tell when I was going against somebody that smoked a lot of weed because they don't miss anything. They pick up on habits and everything.
Mm.
There is no other drug out there that I would play against that I had those same issues with. Somebody that was drinking, somebody that was on recreational drugs, it didn't matter, right? They missed a lot of that stuff. But for some reason, I could always tell, man, because they didn't, they were so focused. And I've talked to a lot of people. I don't personally do cannabis, but I've talked to a lot of people that, they have some amazing ideas while they're.
Cannabis is a very powerful plant medicine. It's not as much of mine, and I do find that mushrooms and cannabis, depending upon how you work with them, can fight each other in your system. But
Right.
Cannabis itself, I love knowing this because I have felt that level of hypersensitivity, that level of hyper focus on the occasions that I have worked with cannabis, and it's no joke. I can see and feel and hear and smell and taste everything. It expands my sensual experience of the world in such an intense way, sometimes too much, right? Sometimes to the point where it's like, oh man, like this is information overload. But I could see how it would actually be really beneficial in like a gambling game. Like that would
I still remember a guy's screen name. His name was "You Buy My Weed," and I'm gonna tell you, he was good. He was a really, really good.
You're like, this guy, I'm not going to play against him anymore.
I'm telling you, he was really, really good.
That's so
Whenever he'd pop up in a tournament on a table, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm
like,
staying
I'm
out
out.
of this
I'm
guy.
out. Run away from that guy. He's way too tuned in
Yep.
from cannabis.
Yeah.
I believe that plant medicines expand us in so many ways. And also, as I get deeper into this world, I also think that just with everything in moderation, and it's all designed to bring me closer to myself.
Yeah.
It's not designed to bring me into the world of the mushroom. It's not designed to take me into cannabis. And that's one of the challenges that we see is we live in such an addictive culture
Yeah.
because we've encouraged addiction in all the ways, right? Like consumption in all capacities. So
Even.
we're just like,
Yep.
it's ridiculous. Like I was just at a conference, a psychedelics and cannabis conference, and they were like, you don't go into a liquor store and be like, I want the highest proof alcohol there is, I want that. But in cannabis stores, they pack it full of THC and they see how much they can get in the smallest container. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense. It's not about more. It's not about more. It's about quality, and it's about the experience, and it's about coming back to yourself. And
Yeah.
for psilocybin and other plant medicines like LSD and San Pedro and ayahuasca, it is absolutely not more is better. That is not the case. It's about quality, and about every single time you engage, it's about integrating the learnings and
Mhm.
giving yourself enough time and space to actually integrate that level of sensitivity that you've opened yourself up to. And
Yeah.
this is where I see people go a little off, right? Is when they get into it, we can get into things and then we can have an addictive tendency. Psilocybin is not addictive. No plant medicine in those categories, no psychoactive plant medicine. Cannabis has some versions of it, but really aren't addictive. However, we can get addicted to the experience of it.
Right.
And so it is really important that you give yourself space if you're going to do, especially if you're going to do macro experiences. I always say, give yourself 3 months of time after a macro experience before you sit with another macro, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're doing over a gram of psilocybin, wait a month or a couple months before you do it again. And then with micro, do a protocol, do a regimen that's 3 months long. Ours is 12 weeks, so about 3 months. Or yeah, I think that's 3 months. I can't count. And then once you finish that, give yourself enough time, give yourself another 3 months off. And that gives you the opportunity to really integrate all of the learnings and the expansion and the shift in consciousness that you've activated.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And
Mhm.
that's just it, when anytime you're dealing with mental health, you have to work through the root problems. And so if you're not taking these breaks, like you said, and taking what you've learned and figuring out what it means to you and what it is that you're supposed to work on, um, then it just becomes an addiction. You're not treating it anymore. It's now recreational.
Mhm.
And that is the huge difference right there. So I absolutely agree.
Hmm.
Well, why don't you tell everybody how can they learn more about you, any websites, your ads? I'm gonna bring you forward and give you that opportunity to just kind of find out where other people can learn this great stuff that I'm learning.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm the co-founder with two of my amazing sisters and also co-facilitators, Jenna Strike and Ashley Gates. And we co-founded Metamorphosis Ventures and House of Embodied Metamorphosis together. House of Embodied Metamorphosis is a 508c1a that is a faith-based organization and allows us to serve sacred sacrament to our members. So you can become a member of the organization, and then you can actually contribute to have sacred sacrament kits so you can microdose with us. We do facilitated microdosing programs. And we also do, we host retreats around the country and also in Costa Rica. So we love working with leaders. We love working with veterans, and have some incredible veterans that are alumni of our program and are part of our community. And you can find us at www.metamorphosis.ventures. And on Instagram, we're at Embodied Metamorphosis. And we also post quite a bit. I personally post a lot on LinkedIn because we really work with a lot of people who have been in the corporate industry or have been leaders in the military. So you can find me, Susanna Rose Stokes, on LinkedIn. And I would love for you to follow me there.
All right, absolutely. And I'll make sure that we get all of the links and everything in the description to make it real easy for everybody to find you guys. Because I do think this is we've got to get more word out. I know 2024 MMDA or MDA is going to be legalized.
Yep.
It probably won't be in the hands of the people that could benefit the most. I don't see the VA handing it out at that
Well,
point.
the VA is just now, they've just approved some clinical trials with MDMA, which is great news. And I was actually on a call with Rick Doblin, who's the head of MAPS. And he asked me, he's like, how do I get MDMA into the military? And I said to him, I said, you have to do it through the VA. I was like, you're not going to be able to get straight into the military. You're going to have to go through the VA. They're a lot more creative with some of their systems. So it is possible. And I do believe this year or next year, we'll see MDMA at least move down from Schedule 1 and have more medical use, which will be it'll be a gateway for something new.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I mean, you spoke a lot of great knowledge that we just got to get people opening up their minds and understanding that just because it has a warning label and a ingredients bottle and everything else doesn't mean that the people behind it are really there to help you. And that's a hard myth to overcome, but it's coming, it's happening. So I appreciate you. If you don't mind hanging on, I will throw the exit video out and I'll be with you in a second.
Okay.
You guys, like I said, man, you always have to understand and keep your minds open. You never know when you close your mind that somebody may have something to say that is going to change your life. And this episode could have just been exactly what you needed. I hope everybody out there enjoys the show and is learning from the guests that come on from all walks of life. It is important that we get to that point where we can have conversations and we can agree to disagree, or we can actually learn something new and change our life. So with that, I hope all of y'all know, don't let the day kick your ass, kick the day's ass.